My name's Angela. I'm the Director of Marketing at the Douglas Stewart Company, and I'm your moderator for today's panel on connecting the dots between the traditional and the virtual space. So we're bringing everyone together here today to talk about how can continuity of learning be maintained outside of the traditional classroom. This is a topic that I know is on everyone's mind as they attempt to plan and make final decisions here as the best learning model that checks off all of the boxes for their. So we really wanted to open up some dialogue on how to best keep educators connected and students regardless of where they are. So first off, before we dive in, I'd like to introduce our lovely panelists here. We can go down the line and I'll let each one of them introduce themselves and just give a real quick, short little introduction on who they are. Why don't we start with, you guys are off mute.
So who did you say we should start with?
Amy.
Oh, okay. Sorry, you were breaking up there. So hello. Let me see if I can wave. Hello, my name is Amy Souter, and I'm the Chief Business Officer of VIATIV. I'm a former public educator, and thank you for being here today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shane Lovellette. I am the Education Strategy Lead at TechSmith Corporation, and we make software products, Camtasia, Snagit, you may be familiar with or heard of in the past. And I've been with the company for about 18 years in a variety of roles, but my background is mostly in media, television, radio, film, production, and creation.
I'm Maxwell Bogue. I'm one of the founders of Wobbleworks and one of the inventors and creators of the 3Doodler, which are 3D pens or pens that are essentially 3D printers, but without the computer or software aspect of them. So you make things in the real world.
Hello, I'm Mike Lorian. I'm the Vice President of Education at Wonder Workshop. I've been in the ed tech industry with a number of companies such as Apple and Leapfrog for about 35 years. And I work with Wonder Workshop, which what we do is create robots and curriculum and software to allow students to learn the next literacy, which we think is coding skills.
Hey everyone, Gabe here from Virbela. I'm a former teacher and educational researcher. Since then, I've been working at a few different education technology companies or immersive technology companies. Within Virbela, I work on a browser-based 3D creation and collaboration tool called Frame. I'll drop the link there just in case you want to check it out, but I definitely don't recommend checking it out while Virbela is running because that can be a bit much for the computer to handle. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Gabe. All right, before we get started here with our panel, I just wanted to send a quick reminder into the audience. So we will take any questions that you guys have at the end of the panel after we get through some of our pre-established discussion questions. If you guys do have any that pop up, though, throughout the session, please send them through the public chat in the very bottom left-hand corner of your screen there. All right, so let's jump into it. As we know, blended learning has been an instructional concept that's been gaining momentum for the past several years. In light of our current global pandemic, blended learning is evolving quickly into a hybrid learning model, which combines both face-to-face and online teaching into a single cohesive experience. Unlike blended learning, though, which is considered more of a traditional classroom setting where technology is used to facilitate activities, deliver content, and assess students, hybrid learning actually defines itself more as an integration between classroom and online learning, balancing both the instruction and the activities between platforms. So jumping into this a little bit here, panelists, generally speaking, hybrid learning environments need to look like? Why don't we start with Mike at Wonder Workshop?
Okay, well, first, I think there's a few questions that we've got to understand based on the current situation. And I think the first one is, how do schools deal with the lack of ubiquitous access to technology resources? And in many cases, the online systems that that have been tested over the last few months since the pandemic came into play have been stressed to the max. And so you also have the performance of those systems in delivering a sound experience for the user come into some level of question. I think one of the key aspects is, do teachers have the expertise, or have they even been trained in distance learning techniques and environments? And I think that's another hurdle that was experienced over the last 4 or 5 months. We know that a lot of the distance learning curriculum has already been designed to be supplemental and not core. So you try to use a supplemental tool in a core situation, there can be some conflicts there. And then parents too aren't well equipped, and we've thought, oh gee, parent becomes a teacher, how does that work at home? And parents aren't well equipped to do that, nor are they any way disposed to do that work. And then at the same time, schools are wrestling between the delivery of their academic mission and also delivery of the other services they provide, like one, a safe environment, two, looking beyond their academic responsibilities to things like school lunches and other services they provide. So it's having a good understanding of the current situation is really important. So I'll leave it to the other panelists to discuss that a little bit.
Reminder to the other panelists, make sure you are not muted.
Yeah, I think, Mike, those are all really good points and the challenges that are being faced right now. And I think if you're looking at considering how do you really combine both these options together and have that cohesive experience from classroom to not being able to be in the classroom and students having to interact and engage outside the classroom at home, that humanization and personalization and the role of the teacher is still critically important in that model and requires a lot more, I think, deliberate outreach communication with the students that is personal, that's showing themselves, that's encouraging, the kinds of things that you could do in the classroom when you're face-to-face that you don't have access to when students are at home and often maybe in challenging situations or at home and having to share resources and all of those kind of things and distractions that exist there. And so really being deliberate about the communication and sharing from the teacher that encouragement on a regular basis, and more often, more frequent than you may even feel is necessary or feel is needed. But the more it happens, the more engaged the students are going to be and the more they feel cared about from having to go through this all together.
I think also age is a huge factor in all of this. That is often, it's easier for a high school student to do remote learning than an elementary school student. And that's one of the biggest challenges, is how to make a remote learning system or a blended or whatever version of it that can engage those younger students and ensure that they're still learning when you've rarely tried that type of model with such young students.
So panelists, any thoughts on the best way to maintain a cohesive experience from classroom to home?
I can answer this one. So yeah, I think, the challenge that teachers have, especially one of them, is presenting material, engaging material that allows students to interact with content in innovative ways. So I think it's really thinking about, in terms of activities that they're doing, what would be best suited for being done if it is a hybrid model, partial in school, partial out? What's going to best accomplish the objective? Is this activity going to be better for students to work on at home, or is it going to be better for them to work on in the classroom? So I think, and then connecting those activities to the learning objectives. I mean, that's no different than you would do in a traditional classroom setting. The teacher is going to make sure that the students understand what the learning objectives are, what the targets are, and then how does each activity, whether it's done at home or whether it's done in the classroom, how does that relate to that learning objective? How is that going to support the learning? Oh, and I'm sorry, in my introduction, I forgot to mention that VADIV, we have lab simulations, STEM lab simulations with built-in analytics. I totally forgot to say what we do. So sorry about that. But yeah, so I really think that that's what they need to focus on is where should I be doing this if you have a hybrid? Is it better to do that in the class? Is it better to do it at home? And then making sure the kids understand why they're doing the activity regardless of the location.
I think another success factor we have to look at is one is the scope and sequence of the content and the lesson plans themselves designed for a blended environment or a hybrid environment, and making sure that folks like us here on the stage have actually taken the step to understand that and design it. I think the next step is then we've got to make sure that those activities are really learner-centric and are not only engaging, but really have the ability to self-motivate that student. Because again, you're not going to have the watchful eyes, so to speak, of the teacher at home. And as we know, as all of us being parents, or at least most of us being parents, understanding how to motivate our child to do academic work has its challenges in and of itself. Then I think the other piece underlying that, there needs to be a system in place that allow teachers to track and provide support for each student's individual learning performance. And so having a system in the background, some sort of learning management opportunity, so you can track students' progress or even be able to look at their work and understand where they may be stuck, understand where they may be off track, is something that I think is very important in the design.
That's a really good point. Having a way to capture student data and also evidence, so that way the teacher can find out where the student is in relation to the target is paramount. And I think that sometimes that can be a challenge with distance learning. You know, if the content or whatever technology they're using doesn't have a way to be able to capture some sort of student work, or it doesn't have any kind of formative assessments built in, then it can make it challenging for the teacher to be able to do those checks to see, you know, where is the student in their learning and what more do I need to do to get them to that proficiency level.
Yeah,
Well
building
said.
on that. Sorry,
Shane,
Angela.
go ahead.
I was just going to say that engagement piece, when they're not, that for the assignments and activities that are going to happen outside the classroom, is really important. I think from that cohesive perspective, ensuring the educator is presenting and introducing that content in a similar way with their voice, with their face. If you know, they're even instructional content that that's coming from a different source that wasn't necessarily created by the teacher, but providing some of that context and wraparound of that content and why that matters for the students, and then having that capability of creating a little bit of accountability around that. So if it's a video they have to watch, you know, assigning points to that and being able to, and measuring the analytics to know that they're actually engaging with that content. It may be having some formative assessments integrated in with the content so that students have to kind of take action. They can't just sit back and passively not engage, and that those kind of things all help really get the students to sit up and pay attention to what they're trying to interact with when they're not in the classroom, and have that extra kind of teacher support to help them do that.
Great point. And continuing down that path, other panelists too, from your guys' perspectives, what elements are most effective at helping students?
I think social pressure is actually something to be considered as well in all of this. That if you can create engaging content that involves others at the same time, it can help to motivate a group of students to make the achievements.
Yeah, to follow up on that, I that's a great point, and sort of I think it's one thing to really foster like peer to teacher interaction, but also finding ways to foster like peer to peer interaction, I think can be really key, and it's not easy when it's online. So, you know, really trying to cultivate those sort of social bonds and working relationships, not just between teacher and student, but student to student as well.
I think also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, Amy, go ahead. You started first.
No problem. So I think, also considering technology equity. So, this is a big challenge across the country, is just, not all households have the same technology. Not all students have that parental support at home to make sure that they're getting in front of the computer. And it's a really big challenge for teachers and also for students. So I really think kind of understanding that, and I know some schools are even working with getting households up to par with technology, but just giving some consideration for that is definitely important, and it's a challenge for teachers.
Absolutely. Want to respond?
I was just going to say that I think the big part of this too is the expectations and really creating that sense of with the students, and that they're all together. You're with them together. Everybody is kind of working together, and you're going to figure it out together. And setting those clear expectations about some of the ways that you want them to work when they're not in the classroom, and how things will happen in the classroom, so that it's all kind of clarified up front. It could be even shared with parents outside the classroom. So setting those expectations there as well about how you want students to engage and interact and take care of the work that is going to happen outside the classroom. So at least they have that understanding maybe, and can help support that as much as possible. It's also helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really good point.
And we've kind of touched on this briefly in a lot of our responses, but let's just lay everything out on the table here. What are some of the biggest challenges and frustrations for leaders and schools and districts and parents with regards to a remote or hybrid learning model?
Learning the technology.
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be one of the biggest challenges, is that you have teachers that have either been teaching for all these years in one manner, and now they have to completely change how they're thinking about teaching. At the same time, they still want to maintain some level of in-school. So it's going to be quite difficult to rejigger everything, so to speak, for this new system. And there's going to be a lot of start-stops and a lot of fails. And then you throw on top of it a lot of technology that not everyone has experience with. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest challenges to this whole situation.
Yeah, and I think at the end of last year, when they closed the schools, a lot of the technology that the districts had adopted, it was tied to a building. It was really focused on being in front of the students. And I think a lot of companies have shifted, but it forced teachers to really look for resources on their own and try to find free things that might not have been, the best content for learning. So I think that's really posed a challenge, as districts now have to focus on, I need solutions that are versatile, that are easy to use, because parents, a lot of feedback from parents was that, hey, it was difficult for me, to navigate. So it needs to be easy for the kids to use, easy for the teachers to manage, and really versatile, so that it doesn't matter if the teacher's in the building or out of the building, in front of the kids or behind the camera. They can deliver the same level of instruction with that solution or that content. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think just a lot of it is fear and anxiety of doing something new and different and having to change everything all at once. And I think there's a lot of ways that teachers could take advantage. You don't have to throw everything away and start from blank slate. There's on-ramps to be able to create and leverage some of the existing content, existing lessons, all of those things that you have, and just then starting to work towards moving those into applying more efficiently and effectively in a blended environment or an online environment for students. I think from the districts and teacher perspective too, the training, the professional development needed kid is really, really important. So if you end up with a hodgepodge of all different, everybody's using something different, it's really impossible to have a scaled professional development and support infrastructure to help teachers be successful. And your support people have to all be experts in every possible tool out there, which is very challenging. And then peers can't really help each other as much either if everybody's doing something differently. So trying to standardize a little bit can help as well, just in terms of making sure tools and technology that is available is somewhat standardized, so at least you can provide that level of support and help people be successful and sort of build that transition to be able to go from where they are today or where before and move that content, getting it into a more effective online delivery.
I think overall teachers do their best work is when they're best prepared. And one of the problems that we have right now is there's just so much uncertainty, whether it be state to state or district to district, as to one, can they safely, have kids in school, out of school, et cetera, right? And so what is that hybrid mix really going to be? Two, how can whatever activities that they set up for the kids be done in a safe manner, considering the virus? So again, there's these situations. The base situation is still up in flux. So it doesn't give them time to prepare. It doesn't give them the time to learn the tools that they need, because they really don't know what the environment's going to look like yet. And given that it's July 22nd, time is running very short. So I think it's going to be, again, a very difficult fall, to say the least.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike. I just wanted to add that I think if you're with that uncertainty, one of the approaches you can take is to design and expect and plan for online. And it's much easier to go from online back into more classroom based. So as that sharing and percentage of time between the two, depending on your district situation and what happens, changes, it's much easier to go from having that planned from online to classroom than to go from classroom based planning and then suddenly have to do that all online. That becomes very challenging to do that transition. So one way to think about if you are doing that and prepping is to maybe think about doing it for online and then make the adjustments back the other way if possible.
Which I agree would work, provided they understood that there was budget there to back them. And I think that's the other, huge elephant in the room. Can they really afford to do all these things when, job one is safety?
Right. I mean, and if you even think about just typical whatever content area, hands-on activities that teachers typically do in a class, whether if it's for science or math or whatever it is. I mean, typically kids are sharing microscopes and materials and consumables because schools don't have the budget to buy a set for every single student. And now, even if they're partially back in the building, that piece is going to change because of social distancing and not, wanting to touch different things. So, even the way traditionally we did things in the classroom will have to be redesigned and thought of in a different way, because it's still going to be critical that kids are interacting with content in ways that they can, deepen their understanding and relate it to their world. And if it's just, that's the challenge teachers have, if they're not in front of them and it's just videos, how do they create that interactivity, behind a computer screen or in the classroom if they're social distancing as well?
Well said.
Yeah, agreed. I think that some of the solutions though could exist in almost pen pal projects, if you will, where people can do pieces at home theoretically and then drop off the piece that needs to be added to the next kid in the chain, as a way of rethinking how a project like that, like a traditional project, could be done.
Max, that sparks a good question. So for the panelists, in your guys' professional experience and through discussion forums and what you've seen on social media or user-generated content, what are some of the best examples you've seen for how a hybrid learning model has been done well?
Ooh, that is a good question. For me, I mean, just because I pay attention to what we're using with our products, is I've seen some students starting to do kind of just that, where like if they're building a bridge, they're taking pieces, and say 4 students are building pieces of the bridge, and then they're taking those 4 pieces and then passing it off to 2 students, who then assembling each assembling half of the bridge, and then they're passing it off to a 3rd student, who's then assembling the final components, and then that is like a group project that's happened remotely. So to me, that's kind of an interesting thing that can be done in this new world, that was didn't make sense before, but it also has a social component as well, because it allows students to interact along the chain.
Yeah, we've seen similar things done with video and having students create video projects and actually put into groups and have them create their videos, and then their peer group is reviewing and commenting and providing some feedback around that video content, and then they can go and make those improvements. And so within those smaller groups, they're able to do that collaboration, helping each other. They're building media literacy skills, as well as presenting on, whatever the topic of for that assignment can be. And this has been found to be as effective, very effective approach for students to really increase engagement, as well as for them to really understand and learn how to work together, how to provide constructive feedback with peers, and then the teacher can help sort of be a facilitator of that. I think the other part of it is really the flipped learning model that was, has been around for a while now, is a very good approach as well, in terms of having delivering students that sort of content of what they need to learn, the lecture style content that they can consume at any time. It provides a lot of flexibility when they're not in the classroom, and then being able to spend either, if it can't be physically in the classroom, that synchronous time to help support them in working on projects and assignments, or answering questions, or in the classroom being able to do that as well. And then it facilitates a lot more project type work that can be developed as well.
I think we've seen the most success come from schools who have had experience in implementing one-to-one computing, because they don't have to worry about the resource. Teachers are understanding, the blended model a little better, et cetera. The other area that's actually, I was reading an article the other day that in Florida, enrollments at the Florida Virtual School are skyrocketing, given the situation there in Florida. And so if you think about that, I mean, there's a operation that's been around for what, 15 years or so. And so just having a virtual environment that has a lot of experience behind it, I think is another critical success factor.
So I think one of the things that I saw a teacher do with our product that was great was using students as the teachers. So she actually had them working in groups. And so our virtual lab simulations, you can share your screen, and actually the students can either work on them independently, or they can share their screen and they can present. So they were actually sharing their screen and working together to teach the rest of the class about wind speed and air pressure and what they learned. And we're actually on the one of the I think it's Zoom. Because they were annotating on the screen, so they were actually drawing out they were pausing the lab and then actually drawing out and writing key points and what they had learned and diagramming. And so I thought that was really interesting, because I've seen that done in a traditional classroom setting in a building, but I hadn't seen that, that type of group activity. And then, each group was responsible for understanding the key concepts and then presenting it to the class through using the virtual lab. So I thought that was a great way to get students buy-in and really keep them engaged and interested in the content.
Fun time here. I'm just going to serve up one final question for you guys. But again, in your opinions, how can Flexion Solutions more scalable experience ends across both classroom and remote learning? Thoughts on that?
I think the underlying systems are very important. So being able to, as we said earlier, track student progress, provide help and support when it's needed from the system itself, I think is important. I think the second factor, obviously, is professional development. We've talked about that. So the more teachers get more and more experience in the way we can provide them tips and tricks along the way, because obviously there won't be time to do a lot of professional development. That's what's going to be important as well.
I think another area to really focus on is ease of use and making sure that that can be used by you got teachers with a variety of skill level and technology expertise, and so making sure that that is as easy to use as possible. It's going to be able to be leveraged by as many teachers as possible is really going to help make that process and give them the ability to get going and transition their materials more easily as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I agree with that. And one thing about professional development, a lot of feedback that I've heard from districts is that, if they're adopting a lot of technology now for distance learning or different software, the teachers are overwhelmed with all of the professional development. So really having an easy to use product that requires less professional development, so that they're not, it doesn't require a 6-hour training is really important. Also having resources and training pieces that the teachers can do as they go. Definitely think content is key. Whatever it is, it should be interactive, aligned to standards, give students the ability to explore in a realistic way, more hands-on type of things that they can do so that they're not missing that from not being in the classroom. And then, the teacher has to have a way to collect student data, especially if they're doing a full distance learning model. Obviously, they can use Google Forms and Google Docs and different things, but they have to be able to collect those formative assessments to check along the way. So any solution that can easily do that for teachers, put it in a report for them and really help them out that way, so that they can get the access to that data to track learning outcomes is really important.
That's great, guys. All right, so I know we're coming up on the end of our session here. I know we've also referenced professional development in a few different areas of this session. We did have a professional development session occurring at the same time as this one. Just to let everybody know, we will be posting recordings for each of the panel sessions on our website. Just submitted the link in the chat below. So check back next week and we'll make sure we have those published if anyone has an interest in the content that was discussed in that one. So on that note, I just wanted to give a tremendous thanks for all of our lovely panelists. Thank you guys so much for your participation and your thoughts, your considerations, for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom with us. And a reminder to everyone else here too, make sure you go and check out our expo hall, especially on the topic of hybrid learning model. We do have some amazing products and solutions offered by a lot of our wonderful brand partners. So feel free to go and chit chat with some of those representatives, including those on our panel up here. Guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Good job, everyone. Thank you. My favorite.